After the events of that fateful night at St. Mark's High School, the students who survived the ordeal tried to move on. The school was temporarily closed, deemed unsafe due to structural issues that authorities conveniently used to explain away the rumors. But in the small town, whispers persisted. Emily and Jake, the two friends who had barely escaped the terrifying apparition of the librarian, couldn't shake off the feeling that something was unfinished. The school reopened a year later after renovations, but the unease only grew stronger. Strange things began happening again. One evening, Emily received a text from an unknown number. "You shouldn't have left the book open. Come back." Her blood froze. She hadn't told anyone about the mysterious journal they had discovered in the library. The journal was supposed to have been buried along with the building's secrets. Jake, who had become more skeptical over time, brushed it off as a prank when Emily showed him the text. But the same night, Jake found his own reason to believe. His dog began barking incessantly at his closet, and when he opened it, a dusty book fell from the top shelf. The book wasn't his. It was the same journal. The two decided to investigate the school's history again, determined to uncover the truth. But this time, they weren't alone. A new teacher, Ms. Carter, had joined St. Mark's, and she seemed oddly invested in the school's past. Emily, Jake, and Ms. Carter began digging into the archives, both in the local library and the school's newly renovated sections. They found old news clippings about a string of accidental deaths among staff and students in the 1980s. Most disturbingly, the incidents all seemed to involve the same part of the school, the basement. The trio decided to investigate after hours. Ms. Carter, with access to the master keys, led them to a sealed-off stairwell in the basement. The air was thick and musty, and the smell of mildew made Emily gag. The lights flickered, casting eerie shadows on the damp walls. They reached a locked door marked storage. But when Ms. Carter inserted the key, the door swung open on its own. Inside, they found an old chalkboard with the words, "Leave now," scratched into it. Ignoring the warning, they pressed on and found what seemed to be an underground library, filled with books that didn't belong in any ordinary school. These were ancient texts, filled with arcane symbols and writings in languages none of them could understand. But then Emily noticed a book with a title she recognized from the journal, The Bound Spirits. The moment she touched it, a cold wind swept through the room and the door slammed shut behind them. A faint whisper echoed in the air. "Why are you here? Why can't you let us rest?" The whispers grew louder, turning into cries of anguish. The trio huddled together, panicking as books began flying off the shelves. Emily clutched the book tightly, feeling its weight grow heavier in her hands. Suddenly, a translucent figure appeared. It was a young girl in a school uniform, her eyes hollow and her mouth open in a silent scream. She pointed at the book and said, "Put it back where you found it, or you'll unleash them all." Emily, trembling, asked, "Who are you? What is this place?" The girl replied, "We were trapped here, punished for their mistakes. The book is the key. If it falls into the wrong hands, you'll be trapped too." Before they could question her further, a deep growl echoed from the shadows. The girl vanished, and in her place emerged a dark, monstrous figure with glowing red eyes. It lunged at them, forcing the trio to flee the room. They barely made it out, slamming the door behind them, but as they stood in the hallway catching their breath, they realized something chilling. The book wasn't in Emily's hands anymore. It was back in the room. The next day, Emily and Jake tried to convince Ms. Carter to report what they had seen, but she refused. "No one will believe us," she said, her face pale. "And if we tell them, we might make things worse." But the entity wasn't done with them. That night, both Emily and Jake experienced vivid nightmares. In Emily's dream, she was back in the underground library, surrounded by the spirits of the students who had died. They begged her to free them, but before she could respond, the dark figure appeared again, whispering, "You're already mine." Jake's dream was more violent. He saw himself running through the school hallways, chased by the same monster. Each time he tried to escape, he found himself back at the locked basement door. When they met the next morning, they knew the entity was trying to pull them back. Ms. Carter revealed that she, too, had experienced something strange. Her houseplants had withered overnight, and when she looked into the mirror, she saw the shadowy figure standing behind her. The three decided to go back to the underground library one last time to destroy the book, believing it was the source of the evil. Returning to the basement at midnight, they armed themselves with flashlights and salter tip they had read in one of the books about warding off spirits. The door to the underground library was wide open this time, as if inviting them in. They found the book sitting on a pedestal in the center of the room, glowing faintly. Emily hesitated, but Ms. Carter urged her forward. "We need to burn it," she said, holding up a lighter. But as Emily reached for the book, the room plunged into darkness. The monstrous figure reappeared, its growls shaking the very walls. It spoke in a guttural voice. "You cannot undo what's already done. Leave now or suffer the same fate." The trio held their ground. Emily grabbed the book and shouted, "We're not afraid of you." She opened it to the first page and held the lighter to the corner. The creature roared, lunging at them, but Jake threw a circle of salt around Emily, protecting her. The flames engulfed the book, and the creature let out a deafening scream before disintegrating into a cloud of smoke. The spirits of the trapped students appeared one last time, smiling faintly before fading into the light. The next morning, the school seemed different. The air felt lighter, and the oppressive atmosphere was gone. Emily, Jake, and Ms. Carter knew they had done the right thing, but they also knew they could never speak of it. As they walked away from the school, Emily turned back one last time and noticed something odd. In one of the windows, she thought she saw the shadowy figure staring back at her. She blinked and it was gone. But deep down, she knew the story wasn't over. Emily, Jake, and Ms. Carter tried to move forward, but the strange events wouldn't let them. Though they had destroyed the book, its influence seemed to linger. The nightmares returned, and the oppressive energy that had vanished from St. Mark's High School slowly crept back. One afternoon, as Emily walked through the school halls, she noticed something peculiar, a door that hadn't been there before. It was at the end of a hallway near the art wing, an area she passed daily. The door was made of old wood, its surface scratched and splintered, and a rusty brass plaque read, "Room 13. She hesitated, her heart pounding. Everyone knew there was no room 13. St. Mark's, like many schools, had skipped that number because of superstition. When Emily mentioned it to Jake and Ms. Carter, they both looked at her with disbelief. "There's no room 13, Ms. Carter said firmly. "I've been here for a year now, and I know every inch of this school." But Emily insisted, dragging them to the hallway after hours. To their shock, the door was there. "I swear this wasn't here yesterday," Ms. Carter whispered, her voice trembling. Curiosity won over fear, and the three of them decided to enter. The door creaked open, revealing a classroom frozen in time. Dust coated the desks, cobwebs clung to the chalkboard, and old textbooks sat abandoned on the shelves. But the strangest thing was the air. It was cold, almost icy, and smelled faintly of decay. Jake pointed to the teacher's desk at the front of the room. "Look," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. A single piece of paper lay on the desk, yellowed with age. It was a class roster, listing names they didn't recognize. At the bottom of the page, scrawled in shaky handwriting, were the words, "They're watching." As they stared at the paper, the door slammed shut behind them, and the lights flickered out. Panic set in as the room plunged into darkness. Emily fumbled for her phone to use its flashlight, but when she turned it on, the screen displayed something horrifying, a grainy, black and white video of the very room they were in. The video showed students sitting at the desks, their heads bowed as if taking a test. But as Emily watched, one by one, the students lifted their heads to look directly at the camera. Their eyes were hollow, and their mouths moved soundlessly. "They're staring at us," Emily whispered, dropping her phone. Ms. Carter's flashlight flickered to life, casting eerie shadows on the walls. The room was empty again, but the feeling of being watched was suffocating. Jake tried the door, but it wouldn't budge. Then they heard it, a faint, rhythmic tapping, like chalk on a blackboard. They turned to see a figure standing at the chalkboard, its back to them. It was writing something slowly, deliberately. Ms. Carter stepped forward, holding the flashlight steady. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice shaking. The figure stopped writing and turned around. It was a man in an old-fashioned suit, his face pale and his eyes black as coal. "You shouldn't have come here," he said in a low, guttural voice. "You can't undo what's been done." The trio froze as the desks began to rattle violently, and the air filled with the sound of whispers. Emily grabbed Ms. Carter's arm. "We need to get out of here now." The man stepped closer, his figure growing taller and more menacing with each step. Jake, thinking quickly, grabbed the roster from the desk and shouted, "What is this? What do you want from us?" The man stopped, his gaze fixed on the paper. For a moment, the whispers ceased, and the room grew eerily quiet. "That is my class," he said, his voice laced with sorrow. "And they were taken from me. If you want to leave, you must bring them back." Before they could respond, the lights flickered on, and the door creaked open. The man was gone, but his final words lingered in the air. "Bring them back, or you'll take their place." Emily, Jake, and Ms. Carter ran out of the room, their minds racing. What had the man meant by bringing them back? They decided to take the roster to the local library, hoping to find records of the mysterious class. After hours of searching, they discovered a chilling truth. Room 13 had existed decades ago, but it was shut down after a fire claimed the lives of an entire class. The fire had been ruled an accident, but rumors suggested it was arson, and the teacher, Mr. Grayson, was blamed. Unable to prove his innocence, he disappeared, and his name was erased from school records. The trio realized that the spirits they had encountered were the students of Room 13, and the man was their teacher, trapped in a cycle of torment. But what did he mean by bringing them back? Emily had a sudden epiphany.